Welcome back into the Sports Source, the segment brought to you by Parkside Cabin Rentals. Winter's almost here. Holidays are almost here. If you've got family and friends visiting this year, why not make it a holiday to remember? Imagine Thanksgiving or Christmas in the Smokies. Visit ParksideCabinRentals.com to plan your winter getaway. Find the perfect cabin for you and your clan. ParksideCabinRentals.com. They got all the floor plans that you can see, and trust me, they've got them if you've got a group of 30 or if you've got a group of just 2, which would be not a group, but a duo or a pair or a couple. Parkside Cabin Rentals as I go through my thesaurus. Want to welcome in the next member of our panel right down there, VFL. Will Overstreet joins us. Will, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
I will start with, this is going to be a quick segment. This is going to be where we catch up time-wise. I'm going to start with you and Bob. We know that they started behind the 8 ball this year in terms of, one, there was a huge dead period before Heupel could ever get in front of anybody. You've got the NCAA stuff hanging overhead. You had 50 people transfer, exaggeration. You had the Pruitt nonsense going on. A lot of bad stuff that he had to recruit around and he's still having to do. So I'm going to say this class and the next class. We're going to look at this over the next 2 years. If you're building this roster, Will and Bob, where is he going to need to put most of his emphasis? You know what his system does, so that may impact your decisions, but where does he most need to build this roster?
Yeah, I mean, because of his system, and I think he's able to make more out of less with wide receivers and with quarterbacks. I think if I'm looking at him, seeing how the importance of this run game has been, and seeing a guy go out, you know, when you lose a Cade Mays in Ole Miss, how that changed the game, I think you need to be looking at offensive line. And then on the other side of the ball, which is going to become very important when you get in these games, you've got to have a better pass rush on the one-on-one. So that either needs to come from an athletic linebacker that can maybe also play a running quarterback and be your guy to get him, or from the outside in, you got to have the guy on the outside that can beat a one-on-one offensive tackle in the SEC and be that guy that they have to scheme up against and can get you off the field either through turnovers or sacks. That's where you've got to go, in my opinion.
It's interesting. The former NFL pass rusher always tends to go to the pass rusher. Bob, we've got offensive line, we've got pass rusher. Is there any other place where you feel he's really got to stack
Will
up?
said exactly what I'd say. Offensive line, defensive line, and linebackers.
Yeah.
Those are the groups you need to concentrate on, because I think this coaching staff seems to be able to take receivers, coach them up. They seem to be able to coach up your DBs pretty well, too, because you've ran a lot of different defensive backs out there. They've played well. So I think if you stay on both lines and then linebackers, these guys seem to be able, the rest of it can take care of itself. Obviously, having an outstanding running back helps, because I think Evans has shown he's more of a game breaker type running back than the other guys you've got. But if somebody said go heavy offensive line, defensive line, linebackers.
Ryan, this is a group that's going to fall back on their evaluations. And here's the thing, I'll buy into that on offense. If they sign a bunch of 3 stars, I'm not going to freak out over that, because we saw him thrive with 3 stars at Missouri. We saw him thrive with 3 stars at UCF. We're seeing him do it now. I'm not worried about that. Defensively, though, I want to see some really good guys out there. This is a strange year. He started behind the 8 ball. What do you think, though, of their recruiting? What are you hearing? Now that for the first time they've got something to sell.
Yeah.
Finally. So what are you hearing? And are we making rush judgments on their recruiting by saying it's not good enough?
To a degree. I mean, I think, first of all, I've said this before, anyone who's going by what he did at UCF, that's just not a fair gauge of anything. You're just a totally different program, totally different type of player you're recruiting. What they've done up to this point, again, as you said, affected by the dead period and all of those things they dealt with earlier this year. Now that they do have a product to sell, I think they are gaining some steam. Now the problem is fans aren't seeing it yet because you haven't had a commitment in almost 3 months. So that tends to happen, though, once the season starts. I think behind the scenes, they've got some things going. They have a chance to finish this class on a pretty high note. So is it going to be a top 10 class or anything like that? I wouldn't go that far, but I do think this class could be better than what we're seeing right now. And I think in general, you can still gauge what this staff is doing by recruiting rankings. Yes, now this class so far is not ranked where they want to finish, certainly, but that doesn't mean it's going to end up there. And I think if they end up there, it's fair to ask questions. But right now, I think they're making up ground behind the scenes, and I think they have a chance to finish higher.
What about down the road? Are you starting to see them make inroads next year's class, the class after that, or is it still just kind of, I mean, basically you still had the same air to sell until recently. You're just selling a dream. But do you feel better about the future and once they get this past them, or are you still saying, well, we'll have to wait and see?
Let's see how this year finishes, because I think this will tell us a lot. There's so many unknowns out there. They've got a lot of irons in the fire right now, but how many of these guys do they get? And if this class finishes outside the top 25 or something, I think that's going to be an indication that it may be a struggle in future years. If they end up climbing into the top 20, top 25, and have a pretty strong finish, and capitalize on what they've done on the field, which I think they're already starting to do, then I think that's a better indication this staff has it going in the right direction. So right now, I would be more bullish. I don't know if this staff's going to recruit at the level we've seen, top 10 classes and things like that, like under Butch Jones, but I think they can recruit much better than they have to this point, and I think they're already starting to.
Okay, Bobby, let me give you a specific question here. Let's say you're just now superstar high school quarterback coming out of the Chattanooga area, and let's take your love of the Vols out of it. But you're coming out of there, you got pro aspirations. You look at Josh Heupel's system. And his quarterbacks, they all put up big numbers. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we spent time this year saying, are those numbers the system or is that Hendon Hooker? We also wonder how many guys from that Baylor-type system make it in the NFL. So that's kind of iffy. So I ask you, if you're a hotshot quarterback, you look at these numbers, does that draw you in, or do you look at it and say, my dream is the NFL, I'm going to look at somebody who cranks out more guys to the NFL rather than it's the system? How do you look at that as a player?
I think it's got to be a little bit of both, but I want to look at the system. I mean, like I can remember when I came up here, we ran a lot of play action. We had a good quick game, and I like, I look at those things. I don't necessarily want to, have
just the NFL
just the
thing.
NFL thing in my mind, and that's one thing that kills me now too is the portal and all that stuff going. You're not playing for a team now. You're playing for yourself.
Well, that's true. That's true. All right. Let me get your 10-second take on that. Is that going to be an issue for Heupel on the quarterback recruiting? That if I were recruiting against him, I would say, yeah, but he and his system are going to get all the credit for your numbers. Is that going to work against him at all?
I don't think so. I think down the road maybe, but right now, no. I think it's more about, is this guy putting up numbers? Is his system going to work? Okay, I'm in. I think for the most part that'll help.
Good deal. All right. When we come back, what is the ceiling for Josh Heupel here at Tennessee? We'll give you our takes on that. Come on back.